A tearful man pours out poison to protect the body of his son. He had just left. A vulture landed on the body, pecking at the child's lips. The child's pupils suddenly contracted. He was still alive. He struggled to push himself up, only to desperately realize he was trapped on a cliff. No one answered his calls for help. Mark could only rely on himself to survive. He tried to climb, but slipped and nearly fell off the cliff. He clung tightly to a rock crevice with only 4 fingers left, hanging in midair 100 meters above the ground. Suddenly, a storm broke out. His strength was quickly running out. Watching the valley being swallowed by floodwaters, he decided to take a desperate leap off the cliff. When Mark woke up, the storm had already passed. He was temporarily out of danger, but his ankle was already infected and swollen. Following the method his father once taught him, he used a stone to reset the dislocated bone, then used branches to make a temporary splint for fixation. Dragging his injured leg, he finally climbed to the top of the cliff, only to see a grave his tribe had built for him. Mark desperately knocked over those stones and ended up crying uncontrollably. At that moment, a wolf howl came from afar. Mark dragged his injured leg and ran, trying to climb a tree for safety, but he was bitten hard on the foot by a wolf. He immediately drew his knife to fight back and finally managed to climb up a tree. But the wolf pack still did not give up. They stayed under the tree all night. The next day, they finally left, leaving only that injured wolf behind. Mark immediately grabbed his weapon. If he could kill it, he would not go hungry for at least 3 days. But just as he was about to attack, the wolf let out a painful whimper. That sound reminded him. His tribe had abandoned him in this harsh land like this. What was the difference between him and this injured wolf? He tied the wolf's mouth with a rope and then treated its wounds. The next day, he found the wolf had recovered a bit, so he fed it some water. Noticing the wolf was still alert, Mark first drank some himself before offering it to the wolf. The wolf finally began to drink, and Mark felt very happy. That day, he caught a wild rabbit. When he brought it back to the cave, the wolf was very excited. It rushed up trying to steal the prey but was pushed away by Mark. Mark bit into the raw meat to declare it was his catch. He finally had a proper meal. While the wolf could only watch on the side, he wanted to make the wolf understand who was the leader. When the wolf seemed to understand, he only then gave it some meat. But when the weather turned cold, Mark could only find insects to eat. The wolf was very unhappy about this because it had to eat insects together with him, so it began to follow Mark to hunt. They discovered a group of wild boars. The wolf charged out and Mark nervously raised his spear. When the wild boars were driven toward him, he panicked and let the prey escape. The wolf looked at him with obvious contempt. From then on, the wolf hunted while Mark cooked. By winter, the two of them had already developed a smooth cooperation. One day, Mark accidentally stepped onto an icy river surface. The ice broke and he fell into the water. He was swept away by the current, desperately hitting the ice for survival. The wolf rushed over trying to save him, but was not strong enough to break the ice. Mark pulled out his knife and cut through the ice. Finally, he floated back to the surface. The wolf dragged him onto shore. He forced himself to stay conscious and started a fire, took off his wet clothes to dry them. In the end, he had to hug the wolf for warmth. The fall into the water made Mark seriously ill. He wanted to return to his tribe but was trapped in a blizzard on the way. They took shelter in a cave but encountered an even greater danger. The wolf jumped out to protect him. Although far from being the monster's match, it fought fearlessly again and again. At the critical moment, Mark raised his bow. But after the monster fell, the wolf was completely motionless. Mark screamed in despair, and the wolf finally crawled out from under the corpse, covered in wounds and barely alive. Fortunately, he found the tribe's markings. Following the markings forward meant hope. After days of trekking, the wolf finally collapsed in the snow. Mark stroked its head, trying to get it to stand up, but it had already reached its limit. So he held his companion in his arms. He only had one thought. If they live together. If they die together. With sheer willpower, he finally reached the end of the road. When he carried the wolf into the camp, everyone was stunned. His father hugged him in disbelief while his mother was in tears. No one believed he had made it back alive. Before losing consciousness, Mark pointed at the wolf. After waking up, he instinctively reached for his wolf. It was lying beside him while the shaman was examining its abdomen. Soon after, the shaman raised a wolf cub.